All right. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue. Welcome online or in person to Concordia University's fourth space. Thanks so much for joining us as we explore thought-provoking ideas and innovative interdisciplinary research from Concordia's individualized program, or INDI graduate students here today. So excited that you could join us. Just to help get you situated, we are streaming this portion of the event to YouTube live from FourSpace. FourSpace is located on unceded Indigenous lands here in Jagé, Montreal, and we would like to extend our gratitude to the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, who are the caretakers for the lands and waters we're meeting on, for their teachings about the earth and our relations. If you're new to FourSpace, welcome once again. What do we do here? Well, we work with our university community to help mobilize and exchange knowledge by co-creating daily activities, such as this one. So today it's our pleasure to welcome in our INDI colleagues for the celebration of research. And to tell you more about it, it's my pleasure to pass the floor to the director of the INDI program, Philippe Ewan. Over to you, Philippe.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. It's great to be back. Like many events, we've had to take a pause on INDI Research Day, but we're back a little wiser, a little more aware, and super excited to push the boundaries more than ever. So thank you for being here. To our in-person guests, our online guests, our international presenters, our domestic presenters, we're all around the world. INDI is the epitome of collaboration, creation, and innovation. And today we are celebrating the unique and interdisciplinary and innovative groundbreaking research of INDI graduate students. With INDI Research, we have hope, we have strength, we have beauty, and we have wisdom. So thank you all for being here to celebrate this incredible research that's happening and the amazing work that has been going on and continues to go on. Those of us who are here in FourSpace, you've had the past hour to mingle and interact with some of the presentations and presenters. We're about to move in, or I guess we actually have moved into our formal portion of today. And I'm very pleased to introduce in just a bit our MC. She's just doing some final preparations. Her name is Christiane Meyer. She is also an INDI student. She researches the effects of misaligned circadian rhythms and investigates the effects of circadian disruption on the mood and addiction of females. And so before, big stuff, huh? We have all sorts of diverse research projects going on here. But before she comes up, I wanted to celebrate somebody else with you today. She is an amazing person that we all know, maybe have not met her in person, but we have all experienced her unrelenting support and knowledge to ensure that INDI's magnificent ideas come to flight. She helps us navigate Concordia's policies and practices, which we all know can be very confusing. She is someone who answers our countless administrative questions that we lob into cyberspace and cross our fingers in hopes that somebody will be there. She is someone to anchor us when we have no idea what to do. Darlene, if you could come up so we could honor you. These orchids are a token of our gratitude to you and just that barely begin to express all that we are grateful for all that you have done. All right, Christiane, it's on over to you.
Okay. Hello, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for the introduction and the kind words in the beginning to opening the INDI Research Day. So my name is Christiane and I will be the MC for today. So honestly, I'm very pleased to be part of the INDI community, and I really appreciate the community we have and the support of each other. So today we will learn and explore the research of the INDI community. I think this is a great opportunity to see all the huge talents we have within the INDI community. But before we're going to start, I would like to make two announcements. The first announcement is, this is kind of a competition, right? So they present today, they showcase their research. And so it's up to you, to the audience, to vote which presentation, what kind of research project is the most, maybe a creative one, brings the most of the innovation, is the most outstanding, is like in terms of presentation, like presentation of the pitch, the content, or like the installation they have. Think about this when you're listening to the presentation. Which one is the most outstanding one? And then after we saw all the presentations, you can vote for the people's choice. And the second one is, we have a committee of experts from academia who are judging the first and the second spot for the INDI Research Day. And here I would like kindly to introduce the committee. We have Natasha Blanchett-Cohen from the Department of Applied Science. And then we have Rilla Khaled from the Department of Design and Computation Arts. And lastly, we have Alyssa Pickney from the Department of Biology. So a quick applause to our judges today. And so for the last announcement, I want to say, now we can start with the presentations. And at first we see the online presentations, Fabio and Morteza and Mosen. And then we have the live presentation here in front of the audience. And in the last part, we have an amazing walkthrough. So what does it mean? We go to each station and we see what the presenters are actually doing. We see the installation. And of course, there's time to ask questions. And this is very, very important. So if you're interested in the project, or you're curious about this, how this is going, or maybe you want to collaborate with them, here's the space to do so. So ask questions. You can do it online. If you use like the virtual environment, you can type in the chat box, but also you can keep your questions for now, and you can go to the presenters, to their station, and ask them right away. I think this is a great opportunity to do so. Okay, thank you. So now we see already the first presenter. Hello, Mosen.
Hello.
Hello. So Mosen is a PhD candidate here in the INDI program. It's Mosen Razuli-Josie, and his research title is Study of Unintended Behaviors in Using Mobility Aids, a Social Cultural Design Approach. So now it's your flow, Mosen, you can present. Good luck.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Sorry. The first step of my PhD studies started by observing this illustration. In reality, when I was in front of a physiotherapy clinic, I observed a person carrying his mother on his back instead of using the wheelchair. These observations sparked my initial questions. Is there a hidden message inside the shape of the wheelchair? Is there any stigma attached to these products that discourage us to use? If so, where this view comes from? Which design principles can help to prevent such unintended behavior? These kinds of unintended behavior or misbehavior annually put a huge financial burden on the healthcare systems and may lead to negative consequences for the recovery time. Answering these questions and reinterpreting the mobility aid products need an interdisciplinary approach, which will help to see the problem's reality through a nuanced and multifaceted lens. So the field of sociology of health and medical anthropology plus design studies, medical engineering are chosen to reach my main objective, that are including to study patients' behavioral and emotional reactions toward the acceptance or refusing the product-based therapy. The second, presenting a set of design principles for mobility aid products. And the third, and most important, we want to design for illness, not for disease. Disease concerned with the mechanical and biological aspects of a problem, a health problem. However, patients are experiencing the illness in which the social and psychological needs should be considered as well. Mobility aids give us the functionality, of course, we know that, but are not adjusted to patients' social cultural view and conditions. Each of these fields present a conceptual framework, as you see here, by which we can do some research in practice. We will come up with some design recommendation in each category. And finally, to define design principle, we will reinterpret all data from the theoretical framework of sociology of disabilities. For instance, in one of my literature review studies, I found that 3 design approach of interactive design, inclusive design, and social design can potentially address such behavior and experiences. And finally, we would like to show that medical designers are the advocates of patients in the non-democratic words of the healthcare. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Mohsen, for the lively presentation. I would like to ask if there are one question, so we can answer one question.
Sure.
Is there one question coming up in the chat? Or yes, do we have a mic?
Who had a question? We can ask folks to come up to that microphone that's there if they have questions in the space. I would welcome you to do so. Yes. And again, a reminder on Zoom that you're more than welcome to jump in with a raised hand or the chat is activated. Thank you.
Mohsen, thank you very much for the presentation. Can you tell me, how are you thinking of assessing these design principles?
When we are talking a design principle, we are talking about the principle can affect the policy of designers to take some actions in reality and affect the patient's behavior or experience. In one of the cases, we have found that trustworthiness could be one of the principles would be applied for the designers, and accordingly, many visual disorders in the environment of a hospital should be removed, like the phobia, technophobia appearance of many medical devices. It makes a phobia and a scare for the patients. That's why that's a kind of design policy, design principle that designer can take and remove many of the such device for making a pleasant state of mind for the patients. And accordingly, that kind of design principle can be attached in the procedure of design product of mobility aid products, actually.
Thank you so much, Mohsen. So now we are coming to our second presenter for today. His name is Fabio Balli. He is currently in Switzerland. So hello, Fabio. His research title is How an Individualized PhD Provided Me with the Resources to Imagine a Future where all humans could live decently and rally people across territories to generate 2 million collective value. Good luck.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Fabio Balli, and I will introduce you to the 5 key steps of my research, which informed me about how to build a future where all humans could live decently. First, the research is for me lively researching. That means that we build research by making our question and our methodology evolve till the end of the research through an open process where the outcomes, the reflections on the methodology and research are always or regularly shared so that others can benefit from it. I would oppose this to a sclerotic research, which is the more traditional way where something is defined in the beginning, then everything is secretly developed, and then we have one outcome that may not be taking benefit of the whole process that we went through. Second, this research was built on a concrete project, which was to create games for health. So here I organized around 20 game jams, so co-creation events where a diversity of people joined to create open knowledge and technologies. A third element was really to reflect on how to build solidarity-driven ecosystems. I identified 4 elements. So it is diversity of people collaborating. Second, the importance of generating collective value. That means always documenting, always reflecting on which license would I use so that other people can use, reproduce, and improve what I've done. A third is to converge across groups. So not to split into small groups that don't have the energy to build something on the long term, but rather to say, we are different teams, let's work together to build one congruent project. Then we have the force to also bring it forward together. And the fourth element is to revisit collective narratives. So I identified different narratives, such as the idea that we have to compete, but that perpetuate suffering, that generate violence. And I feel that's important at one point to really reflect on these scientific axioms that are in fact wrong and that don't enable to live decently and healthily together. The fourth element is how to implement that. So that was another step in my research, the organization of the festival Taking Care Together that took place in Geneva last year, where a few hundreds of people joined to really discuss and create new approaches of health that are inclusive and where people are really sovereign in deciding and defining the rules that affect us all. This enabled us to create a collective value of over $2 million together with the Breathing Games initiative. And the fifth part is really a few steps that could help people really coordinate these efforts, even very large groups. And I gave the example of doctoral students. If doctoral students would come together, even a group of 10, if they would document and release the work they do together under open licenses, they would already have created a value of over $1 million at the end of their collective research. So I believe that's an interesting and inspiring way to reflect on the future of university. You will be able to find.
Thank you, Fabio. So are there any questions for Fabio? Okay, I guess there's no question on Zoom? No, okay. Then I have a quick question. Fabio, I saw the number of 2 millions. Is it like a number on purpose or is it like interchangeable? The value?
No, it was really based on the documentation. So logging the time people invested, logging the funding we received. And what was the outcome was we got about 60,000 Swiss francs from funders, but the most part of the work was done by benevolent contribution. And this, I feel, we often miss to understand that the biggest value in a project is not the amount of funding. So the myth of having private investors, etc., but rather that if we come together, if we share our resources, then we bring the biggest value to a project, and then we can also release it so that others can benefit from it. So moving away from scarcity and the myth of competition towards building something together to live better together.
Yes, I think this is a very, very great idea to do for the future. It's a very interesting project. Thank you for answering the question, Fabio, and thank you.
Thank you.
So now we are coming to our next presenter. And here we have Morteza. Okay, good. Yes, Morteza Hasbai, he's also a PhD candidate here in the INDI program, and his research title is Parametric Architecture from Context and Livability, Challenges to Optimization Complexity. So hello, Morteza. I think he might run a little bit late, so maybe we can put him aside and go with the next one. And the next one is Mo, actually. No, actually, it's not Mo. I'm sorry. So the next one, we have the live presentations. So it means like the presenters are coming now here and they present in front of the audience. So now we finished with the online virtual presentations and we come to the next phase, the live presentations, before we start with the walkthrough, okay? So, and here we start with the first one, and the first I have on my list is Federica Martin. She is also a PhD candidate, and her research title is Learning Shared Leadership in an Undergraduate Group, a Practice Perspective. So welcome, Federica.
Thank you very much, everyone. So I'm interested in shared or collective leadership. So typically when we talk about leadership, most of us will think about a person, a leader, who has certain types of skills, certain personality traits. But I think it's important that we move far away from this individual perspective, this almost hero perspective, and really look at how we can develop our collective agency in participating or developing leadership together. So what my main interest was in this study is looking at how this collective leadership is actually accomplished and how it can be developed. So bringing together the two fields of management and adult education. So to do this, I worked with a student group of 13 people, and I followed them for a period of 8 months. I attended their meetings, I attended the events they put on, I studied the documents, the tools that they used, and I interviewed some of them. So the findings are still emergent, so I'm still analyzing and writing. But what I did find is the way they organize themselves, which could be described as being shared leadership constellations, this allowed them, along with the use of some of their documents, their tools, to really engage and to accomplish shared direction, or as I call it, leadership. And how did they learn this? They learned this by actually engaging in their practice, which was creating different events. They learned this from the old timers. So some students had been in the group the year before. And so they helped develop the newcomers. They learned this by using documents that had been designed by groups, the previous groups over the last 10 years, I would say. And each year the groups would tweak these documents, make them better. And so this became an important part or an important tool for them to learn how to work together and how to engage in different patterns of behavior, such as sharing information, such as supporting each other, such as developing each other. Those are just some examples of patterns that I found. But all these patterns certainly contributed to the accomplishment of the shared direction or the shared leadership. And lastly, a few beginning ideas about how organizations can help strengthen this shared leadership, or even develop it within their organization. And I really think, so these are our first thoughts, but that organizations can really look at how the roles of team members or their employees can be designed in such a way that more people are engaged in these patterns of behavior together, so that everybody can contribute to this shared leadership, to the sharing of direction. Also, I think groups within organization can reflect on the patterns of behaviors that they engage with. They can reflect on the documents and how they're used together to create direction. So these are just a few first thoughts. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Frederica, for this great presentation. Do we have one question? Yes, there's one question. Can we? Yes, perfect. So the question is from Lucia. Are you beginning to see the ways in which this research may or will contribute to new views and approaches in a more traditional type management programs?
Hi, Lucia. Thanks for the question. So indeed, the study was done within a university. So one of the first goals was to see how we can improve or how we can start engaging in the development of shared leadership within a university context. And so yes, it's quite a different paradigm, because what is being taught today is all individual centered. It's based on, psychological theories, whereas this practice perspective is going more to sociological theories. So I think there will be an importance that will have to be brought to the idea of context in terms of practice, what people are engaging in. And I don't think we'll be able to separate leadership from the actual practice that people are engaged in, their actual activities, what they do together, their goal as a group, the tools that they use. So I think, yes, this perspective should be brought. Doesn't mean we should eliminate the other traditional psychological based perspective, but I think this could be a nice addition, and we could certainly work more closely with student groups or even student teams within the classroom to look at this.
Yes, thank you, Federica. It's a very exciting topic. Thank you for answering the question and your presentation. So now we are coming to our next presenter, and her name is Marie-Ève Duchamp. She's also a PhD student, and her research title is "We All Care About Food, Exploring Ways to Mobilize Citizen Consumers to Resist the Appeal of One-Click Convenience when Buying Food." Hello.
Hi. Am I speaking? Okay, loud enough. Okay. So hi, everyone. My research is around convenience, and my three disciplines are food studies, especially food marketing, communication studies, and visual arts. So this is also the first piece, a research proposal of what I intend to do with one of the studies of my PhD. So we don't have the results yet, but still I explain the process. So think about the last time that you ordered from your favorite restaurant because you were looking for convenience. Dressing up, fighting the winter, and spending a lot of time at the restaurant were probably not on your mind. Instead, you were probably looking forward to staying at home with a comforting meal from your favorite place. As you waited at home for your food, following probably the delivery driver on the Uber Eats application, with excitement, the anticipation of the flavors of your favorite food and the great satisfaction that would come from your evening probably rose. But how many times have you ever felt that your expectations were higher than the reality? When your meal arrived, it was cold with plastic fork, and well, you spent less than 15 minutes to eat with the TV on in the background or with your phone opened. In other words, with distractions such as the TV and the phone, a poor meal quality if it's cold, and a lower ambiance than in the restaurant, the eating experience cannot feel the same. So after such an experience, it is easier to recall a lower level of satisfaction with your favorite restaurant and to keep it as your most recent memory of that place. So can convenience backfire? In this case, convenience can result in lower satisfaction than the actual experience of going out and eat at a restaurant. What if the anticipated convenience leads to a lower level of satisfaction of the overall eating experience? Through 2 studies, I want to understand if the predicted pleasure of ordering food online is actually higher than the actual pleasure of eating food at home. My research aims at developing a comprehensive and nuanced understanding of how consumers appreciate a meal when convenience is top of mind. This will encourage restaurateurs to look beyond convenience in their competitive efforts by identifying the experiential value and benefits that consumers care about. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-Eve. I think everyone can relate to this topic, and ordering online and sitting in front of the TV. I think this is a situation we know very well. Do we have one question from the audience? Yes.
You mentioned visual arts as one of your, how are you going to bring that into this work?
Yes, that's a really good question. So this is the first studies, research of many. So the following research would be to understand how communication and visual arts can encourage restaurateurs to put experience beyond convenience in their efforts to market to consumers and to enhance the potential experiential benefits of food. So it will be in communication efforts and how we can use images and words to put the experiential benefits in front.
Thank you again, Marie-Eve. So now we are moving forward to our next presenter. And here we have the pleasure to have Zayantan Mendell, a PhD student from the INDI program as well. And his research title is Ghosts in the Cell. Good luck.
Hi, everybody. My name is Zayantan. So my research is situated at the crossroads of formal linguistics and neurobiology of language. Thank you. So I'd like to clarify what I mean by linguistics. So I don't work so much on the specifics of languages itself, say English and French. I'm more interested in what allows us as a species to acquire natural language, while no other species does. One of the, So one of the insights we've had from almost 50 years of linguistic research is when you represent words in the brain, you don't represent them as sounds. So if you think of this word bet, it has 3 sounds, b, t. And linguists have found that your brain doesn't really represent the sounds as a whole. So you don't represent b as a whole, but as a sum of small features. So b has a feature consonantal. It tells, thank you. So b has the feature consonantal. So it tells you it's articulated with a stricture that causes some restriction in how air flows out of your articulatory cavity. A is a vowel, so it's marked minus consonantal. The crucial part is you can see each segment is a sum of its features. But when you hear, like right now you're hearing me speak, I'm not stopping in between each word or between each segment. So how do you go from an input waveform that's continuous vibrations in the air to your brain representing things as discrete symbols? So What we know about this process is your auditory periphery takes these input waveforms and gradually transforms them until they reach the auditory cortex, where you have specific neurons that are sensitive to spectrotemporal receptive fields, which are basically frequency distribution over time that characterizes small qualities of sounds. And there are specific neurons that are sensitive to specific spectrotemporal receptive fields. Here you can see this intermediate stage that I've marked with a question mark, because right now we have a broad idea of what happens at this stage. So for instance, we notice if a sound is applosive, like p or b, where there's a burst of air, or if it's a nasal, like let's say na. And then these neurons use these landmarks to detect further features. So once you have noticed something is a nasal, you then go on to decide if it's a voice segment, if it's a voiceless segment. But we don't know exactly how the brain does it. There are two major questions. One is, are there specific anatomical portions involved in this? And the next is, what do they do? Okay. So Masgarani et al. In 2014 did this study that sort of is the only study we have so far that tries to localize specific brain areas. So what they did was they implanted electrodes in patients undergoing surgery and recorded what each electrode does. So if you look at the chart on the top right, there's E1 to E5, those are specific electrodes implanted in specific parts of the brain. And on the y-axis here, you have a list of segments. So on the top, you have the plosives. That E1 electrode is sensitive specifically to plosives. The E2 to sibilants, the E3 to back vowels, the E4 to front vowels, and so on. Now, this is great evidence that there are specialized hardware in the brain that looks for specialized sounds. But the problem is they're responding to sets of sounds, right? Not individual sounds. And even if they're responding to individual sounds, these are combinations of feature. So what I'm asking is, can we narrow this down to individual features? So instead of asking, how does the brain represent this class, I want to ask, how does the brain represent this one feature, voice? Okay, so what we're doing here is you're using a functional magnetic resonance imaging study to contract two kinds of syllables. Here you see za and sa, the vowel is the same. If you look at the initial consonants, they're both consonantal, they're both continuant. One is plus voice, one is minus voice. So the entire difference, even though we have multiple sounds, multiple segments, the total net difference between the two conditions is that one feature. When you play these features over and over, your brain responds, and one of the ways of detecting the response is measuring the hemodynamic response function, which is the brain's capacity to consume oxygen. As activity increases, oxygen demand increases. What this lets us do is it lets us specifically isolate cohorts of neurons that are sensitive to that one feature. The next question we asked is, if they're responding to a specific feature, what is the feature representing? If it's an encoding, encoding of what? When you say voiced, we're referring to vibrating of the vocal cords. So that is an articulatory function. You vibrate your cords, and that vibration produces an acoustic note. You vibrate, let's say, z, z, z. You can feel your vibration here. If you say sa, it's absent. So we've noticed that the Broca's area 44 and 6, they respond to articulatory targets, whereas the STS and STG respond to acoustic maps corresponding to these articulatory targets. And when there's a match, neurons at the area SBT point to those combined activities, and that conjunctive representation creates a feature. From here, the feature is sent into the anterior insula and basal ganglia, which basically combine together to compute which muscles to move during articulation and when. So you get a spatiotemporal coordination, which is then sent to the pre-SMA, which integrates the spatial information and the temporal information, and then it's sent out to the primary motor cortex, to move your tongues, to vibrate vocal cords, what have you. Thank you.
Thank you for this very detailed presentation. Do we have any questions from the audience or online? Otherwise, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
The question is, so we know that neurogenesis in the brain, right, is affected by the sex. So my question is, do you see differences when you study like humans? Do you see any differences between men and women in your cohort?
In terms of the maps? So, okay, I think I should have mentioned that when we say that we are localizing things and there are specific brain areas, these are mostly functional areas, not in the phrenological sense. So I'm not saying like there's this specific region that you can measure by, let's say, 5 inches from the top or something like that. There are broad anatomical similarities. So if you look for instance, Broca's area or a specific portion of Broca's area between all of us in this room, there'd be slight variations, but they're generally in the same place. So you're not gonna find like mine's up here, yours back there, but there's variation. But it's important to know that these are functional characterizations. So you speak French, I speak English, both has voice. Similar neurons with similar properties respond to them, but there are small variations. Regarding gender, I'm not sure, but I wouldn't think so because men and women acquire language similarly. We speak differently, but that's due to, the vocal tracts are different, the oral cavity is shaped different. But if you say the word Sue and I say the word Sue, you could tell if it's a man or a woman, but you also can tell it's the same word. So that's the level I'm interested in.
Thank you so much.
Michael, would you like to go ahead with your question? Not sure.
Thank you. I had a very quick question about the the contrast between the voiced and unvoiced consonants, because there's evidence that the pitch processing happens more on the right hemisphere than the left. So I was wondering whether you saw an asymmetry between the two broad manners areas on the left and right side for that particular contrast of voiced versus unvoiced.
I'm sorry, I kind of missed the main part. Could you just repeat that?
You showed us the brain region that was active in response to the voiced versus the unvoiced syllable.
Right.
And so there is pitch information in the voice and it's absent in the unvoiced, but there's also evidence that pitch processing tends to be more lateralized on the right side. Did you find this, or was it activated?
Oh, yeah. So most of our candidates are right-handed. We were sort of careful about that because language lateralization also interacts with handedness. So far, we've only done the first level analysis. As you know, like getting detailed functional maps requires subsequent analysis, but we haven't found any major deviations from lateralization, but that might have to do with the fact that so far we've only done 7 participants. I'm planning on doing 30, and I'm not including left-handed participants right now, but that would be an interesting thing to see that if lateralization and handedness, the correspondence is systematic.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for answering the question. Of course, I see there are many more questions, so maybe you can keep your questions, and afterwards we have a large Q&A session where you can go to each of the participants or even ask it online and ask even more questions. So now moving forward, we're coming to our next presenter, and this is Morteza Hasbai. He is also a PhD candidate in the INDI program, and his research title is Parametric Architecture: From Context and Livability Challenges to Optimization Complexity. Good luck, Morteza.
Hi, everyone. Is it working? Okay. Okay. My presentation is about parametric architecture and livability. Oh.
Just give us a second, Morteza.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is it good? Okay, can we go to the next slide? Okay, all of us have heard about ChatGPT. So it's really trending right now. And then whenever we wanted to the conferences, we will ask ChatGPT, I have a conference, and then this is the topic of the conference. I need abstract 150 words, and then ChatGPT produce something. And then you will tweak it a little bit, send it to that conference or the journal, and it's just 5 minutes. So it's not only for the writing. When it comes to the architecture, I remember the time that I started my bachelor program. So we have a tracing paper, we have a pencil, and we spent almost days to create a form of the building. And then we had discussion with our teacher about the culture, about the city that we are designing, about a lot of parameters that we need to consider when we're designing a building. But what happened right now, when I see like a young generation of architects, they just use parametric software computer for designing. For example, they use a parametric software, and then they ask the software, so I'm designing a building for 100 people, and then it's in the front of the water. Can you give me a nice form? And then the computer produced this kind of seductive form that I cannot imagine that I can produce it with a paper or pencil. So you will see that a student designed a perfect thing in the first year, but it has consequences. Next. So here there is some example that produced with this computer, maybe you call it computerized architecture or parametric architecture. As you can see here, this is a design studio in Japan. So the form is nice, but when you look at the upper pictures, so how this building connect to the neighborhood, how this building has a connection with the other building. Is the designer consider kind of contextual element to connect this building with the environment? For example, let's say I'm designing something in the Asia, for example, in India or in the China. Can I, pick up that building and put it in North American city? Like the culture is play a big role. And also there is another one in LA, is a exhibition of cars, and then when you can see the form is not connected to the environment. So here, when I see this kind of picture, so I realized that there is something missing. And here is where my PhD started. I wanted to see what is the computer consequences when we're designing with the environment. So if we go to the next slide. So here, first I started to look at the word context in architecture. And I tried to deconstruct it to the different domains. So I said, so context could be social. So people will communicate with the building. Also building will communicate with each other. What about cultural? Every community have a specific culture. When we're designing on that culture, we need to consider that kind of culture. Political, like the price of the land. So if you wanted to do a crazy building or like seductive form in a poor neighborhood, it might be not possible. And also historical aspect. For example, if you have a historical building near to your building, you should to consider that you are designing close to the historical building and your design should respect to that building. And then physical, environmental, and economic aspect. So I tried, so I'm not presenting all of the thing. I try to break down all of the parameter, and first part of my project is how the computer miss this kind of element. The second thing, because AI will be our future, I'm trying to find a way that we can incorporate this kind of intangible and subjective parameter into AI and computers. This is my presentation. So if you have easy question, ask me, but if you have tough question, ask me later, not in front of the others.
Yes, thank you so much, Morteza, for this lively presentation. There's one question that's amazing.
I'm sorry, this might be a hard question. All right, so if we think about ChatGPT, it's trained on an incredibly large base, and that's everything that can be scraped online. Okay, I'm curious to know what you think the corollary might be for architecture. If you say that intangible is incapturable, I think that it is, but I think that those parameters don't exist yet. But I want to hear what you think they are.
So yes, we had a discussion about some parameter. For example, we had a game, we designing a game to put kind of intangible and qualitative parameter into game. And then our main problem was, so when the people play the game, so we cannot score these qualitative parameters. So we try to use them. When I said me, it's like teams that working on our lab. We try to break down this parameter and try to add a value, like it will be somehow mixed qualitative and quantitative, and try to break down this qualitative parameter into qualitative into quantitative, and then try to add them on the computer, on the binary language of computer, because computer or ChatGPT doesn't understand the qualitative, like it's only understand the numbers. So we try to connect that. So I don't know if I respond to your question. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Thank you, Murtaza. Thanks for connecting ChatGPT to architecture. As ChatGPT is changing the role of writer, how do you see the AI is changing the role of architects?
So I was talking with one of my friends, and then my friend said, I don't need to send my writing to the editor. I just put it on the ChatGPT and then edit the way that I wanted, like grammar, everything. And also when it connected to the architecture, I feel that it makes our work easy as an architect, as an urban designer. I see like it makes our work easy, but I feel that always there is a human factor need to be connected with the computer and AI. And I think if like we could use AI on architecture, it definitely help us and it will be our future, but we should not remove the human aspect of the designing, which if we remove, we will end up with this kind of form that they are not connected to the context and environment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mateza. Okay, so now we are coming to our last presenter, not for today, but only for the live presentations, before we go to each of the stations. So please welcome Mohammad Abdalreza Zadeh. He's also a PhD candidate in the INDI program, and his research title is A Strength-Based View of Homelessness. Good luck.
Thank you, everyone. While we hear a topic, mostly our mind generates some images. And while I talk about homelessness, I invite you to observe those images for a few seconds. Now I invite you to imagine a community space that someone enters this community space and starts dancing. And at the corner, you see a person who is knitting free hats for the community. And at the table, there is a writer talking about their recent story and how they develop the fictional characters. And you see some folks outside of the windows that are camping on the street. And sitting on the sidewalk, you see a violinist who is playing the unhomely rhythm of the city. These are few snapshots of my work and life experience with unhoused people in the city of Montreal. The traditional and dominant approach views homelessness with widespread stigmas, like those generated images: lazy, criminal, drug addicted, or mentally ill. These misunderstandings can lead to significant discrimination and reduce their access to the public services. Critical scholars and activists advocate a strengths-based model that ask policymakers and social workers to invite unhoused people for developing programs and policies, viewing them as potential, not risks. Can we go to the next slide?
Mo, we're having issues locating your slides. We don't seem to have them.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I can just generate this slide with words.
Oh,
yeah.
is this
Oh,
it?
we have this slide.
Okay.
Yeah. The strengths-based perspective to homelessness, instead of looking at the cracks, asking what is the problem, it looks at the blossoming flower, asking what is right. It's about engagement, not intervention, understanding, not diagnosis, empowerment, not control. Among strengths-based tactics, there are emerging art-informed practices. And in my research, I'm examining the role of art for empowering unhoused people. I organize pop-up archive sessions in the familiar and comfortable spaces of unhoused people. During these sessions, we talk, make art, build communities, and respond creatively to the things that matter. I observe and analyze the power dynamics between unhoused people and their stakeholders, like social workers. And my current findings show that art-informed and embodied practices have great potential to build authentic and truthful relationship between unhoused people and all the stakeholders. Unlearning our assumptions about homelessness is the first step to addressing homelessness. And I believe that as researchers and practitioners, we must build creative and safe spaces for unhoused people to transform their own potentials and ideas into sustainable and democratic solutions. For example, if you are in trouble, your hopes, dreams, and strengths are the only drivers of the change. We need to approach homelessness the same. This is not a lonely project. It's an interdisciplinary project working with different initiatives like Pedalbox Gallery. I also worked with the Archive Network in Concordia. That these are two grassroots initiatives in Concordia. Pedalbox Gallery is owned by Christine White, MA in Art Education. It's a mobile, disruptive space that goes to the public spaces, helps artists to exhibit their artworks, or inviting people to make art, or just bringing questions about our unhomely city and housing crisis issues. Also, Archive is a community art studio that everyone is welcome, and its mission is to bringing diverse people together and build truthful relationship between each other. And at this point of my research, I'm building connection also with some nonprofit organizations in Gay Village and also Milton Park. And I think that the role of art is a mediatory space to bring all these people together and changing their perspectives to each other. Thanks.
Thank you, Mo. Do we have a question from the audience or from the online setting? Yes.
Mohammed, you mentioned Milton Park. Could you elaborate on that? Is that for the homeless people, the Aboriginal population?
Yes, exactly. I just started some volunteering works with Open Door Shelter and also CCMP, and working in the kitchen or running some art sessions. And as you mentioned, that there is a crisis there, and many unhoused folks there are indigenous people. And I was just mentioning one day, 2 months before that, it was a cold day in Montreal, and I was just walking on Park Avenue Street, and I saw an indigenous artist sitting on the sidewalk like this. And I just noticed that there is a sand in his hands, and he's doing the sand curving. And I was just questioning that this person in this cold weather is making art, and he has totally different worldview, and how I cannot understand this difference.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mo. So now we will start with our walkthrough. So I mentioned we were sitting like for almost 1 hour. So I would like to ask everyone to get up and to follow us, where we can look at the other presenters, which have installations mainly. And we will start we go around this screen, and then we will start with Gracia. Thank you.
To go pee, so it's perfect.
Yes.
Have a seat, everyone. Get comfortable.
So welcome to a new setting, actually. You can sit down here as well. We have some few spots left. So come. Don't be shy. There's enough space for everyone. So here we have our next presenter, and this is Gracia Daya-Jalea. She's also a PhD student in the INDI community, and her research title is Come Sit With Me.
Good luck. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Get comfortable. Have a seat. There are plenty of seats. So my larger research seeks to reimagine museums, cultural organizations, and public spaces into local sites for healing, transformation, and innovation. So as a professional, I've had the rare privilege of understanding the challenges and opportunities before the sector, the museum sector in particular, from a variety of different vantage points. As a founder of an unconventional museum without walls that has no permanent collection, where I designed containers where multi-stakeholder collaborations could emerge and where local community-led initiatives were prioritized. As an administrator and a fundraiser who knows all too well what it's like to run a small nonprofit, as an activist who lobbied for change both at the provincial and federal level, and then as a policy and research analyst for the Canadian government. And so what I learned as a professional is that there is no shortage of data, alternative models and tools, or even a lack of goodwill. In fact, I've learned that there's plenty of goodwill, data, and alternative models and tools out there pointing towards change. What prevents change from advancing is power, our reluctance and fear to acknowledge it, explore it, and study it in ourselves, in others, and in systems. And that is true from all sides of the equation. So Come Sit With Me, which you are getting a taste for right now, is a container that seeks to do just that. It brings together so much of what I've learned through my coursework since starting my PhD here at Concordia. It brings together oral history as both theory and method with my supervisor, Anna Sheftel, my work to rewrite my teaching philosophy by revisiting my own journey from student to teacher and back again, to locate moments of agency, resilience, and creativity by connecting with my own cultural roots through Panaya's pedagogy and mother scholarship in my art education class I took with Juan Carlos Castro. Research I've done on the Playable Cities movement with Chris Moore to understand how play, humor, and joy can create openness for change and transformation. And then finally, interdisciplinary approaches to design with Miranda Smitheram, where this work has really emerged from. So I built this container with my grandmother in mind. She died last year, and it was originally entitled, "What Do I Still Have to Learn from My Grandmother?" So family bonds and connections have really grounded and guided my research. They are the route through which I have identified and woven both theories and practices into my work. And so my hope is that this becomes a container through which I and others can study power on a personal level and relationally. Can this container become a site for healing, care, reconciliation, empowerment, and transformation? And that's very much what I'm hoping to find out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gracia. Do we have a question from the audience? Online? No? Okay, then I have a question. What do you think, because you were asking the question in the end, do you think this container will be a place for the future for healing, transformation, and so on. What do you think? Do you have a hypothesis?
Yes, so I believe it will be. Again, like I mentioned, my background and expertise in that space, and one thing that I've realized is it's not that there is an absence of language or there's a lot of talk about power in museum spaces, but it's how we approach these conversations, how we conduct ourselves in these spaces. Like, this looks very different from a roundtable discussion that you may have in other settings to have those conversations. And so again, I feel like I've been studying this since 2015, how to reimagine museums. And this is just another way. Again, very much inspired by my grandmother, like how different would it be to sit beside a minister in this setting versus a roundtable discussion in a cold boardroom. Yeah.
Thank you so much again, Gracia. And we need to mention this installation is ongoing. You will start soon. So if you have time, it's an amazing project. At what time are you starting?
Yeah, so it's actually going to occur in 2 different spaces. So the actual installation and participatory performance, which is what this will be located upstairs on the 10th floor at the Acts of Listening Lab. Currently, it's invite only. I'm relying on existing relationships of trust to kind of experiment with this space, but there will be a public offering, which will be a live feed of the performance that will be occurring upstairs here for the public, along with some of, I've started an Instagram account called My Butterfly Teacher. I can talk about that at another time, why that name, but these are some of the objects, the material objects that will be in the space, which you can see here. Yeah. So that will be from 2 to 5, or no, 2:30 to 3:30 streaming here. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Gracia. Of course, yes. Okay, so now we need to move on to our next station. So I hope everybody can move with me and the judges. We will go to Antonio. So be careful, we have a cable here, so maybe we make a step. So welcome, Antonio. Antonio Starnino, he's also a PhD student in the INDI program, and his research title is Nurturing Activism, the Role of Relationality in Shaping Activist Groups Process. Good luck, Antonio.
Thank you. All right. So taking advantage of INDI Research Day, rather than presenting the entirety of my PhD research, I'm going to be presenting a project that I feel encapsulates an important part of it. So often what comes to mind when we read or hear the word activism are images of protests, placards, mass mobilizations in the streets, blockades, raised fists, and megaphones. However, underneath all that is an invisible layer of organizing, strategizing, and planning. The actions of people voluntarily coming together and collectively holding a structure that enables them to target key issues for change. It is this invisible layer that forms a focus of my inquiry of my PhD INDI research that draws upon the applied human sciences, design art, and communications to understand how these groups give shape to their ways of working together and what keeps them together over time. We find a possible answer to this question through the work of Canadian climate activist and scholar Jen Gabi, who posits relationality as the key for future social movements to find success and relational tensions as one of the most significant internal barriers faced by climate activist groups, fragmenting them from the inside. Thus, this presents a paradox to our common understanding of activism. For activist groups to be most effective at fighting for change externally, they must foster relational ways of being internally. This paradox introduces inherent tensions. To fight, they must care. To resist, they must embrace. To challenge, they must empower. Today, I put in evidence 2 specific interdisciplinary theoretical approaches that can help us better understand how activists can begin to do this. The first is that of social fields. First developed by Otto Scharmer and advanced by Concordia professor Eva Pomeroy, social fields emerge whenever people come together for a shared purpose and explores how the group's very source conditions can give rise to the quality of how they relate to each other and ultimately producing their outcomes. According to this theory, social fields, much like the fields we find in nature, need to be nurtured and cared for to survive. Here, I bring forward a second theoretical approach of ontological design, which is described by design writer and educator Anne-Marie Willis as a double movement of sorts. that what we design shapes us and inevitably shapes what we design. Thus, the very practices that activist groups use to work together can be seen as ontological, as they shape the very essence of what the activist group is, who then goes on to mold new practices. Taken together, my research aims to show how groups that design and enact relational practices can nurture their very social fields, improving the quality of how they relate to each other, and ultimately increasing their odds of seeing their desired change come into the world. In an effort to make this tangible for activist groups themselves, I designed a zine that draws upon numerous case studies brought forward by Colombian-American anthropologist Arturo Escobar in his book Design for the Pluriverse. The cases I study highlight relationally oriented practices and artifacts of activist groups from the global south, such as Zapatista movement of the Chiapas, Mexico, and the global north, such as the 15M Indigados movement of Spain. These case studies are organized across 6 overarching design principles that act as a possible guide. Number 1, making a place, which looks at the role the place and environment holds as an actor in the group's dynamic. Sharing to foster the communal speaks to how the act of giving a place of ourselves, in the act of giving a piece of ourselves, we can become collectively whole. Governance as an act of service shows that our relationship to time and dialogue is directly connected to our relationship to each other. One to many shows how we can scale movements relationally. Weaving strands of solidarity aims to move past groups as inanimate networks, but instead as strands that are held together by weavers. And finally, anchoring to a plan for life shows how establishing narratives for possible futures creates conditions to foster relationality, community, and ecology. As an intimate and personal medium, this zine no doubt exposes my limitations due to my positionality, both as a researcher and my privilege as a white male cisgender settler. I recognize the incompleteness of these case studies and how the concepts I speak to have been built on the work of generations of feminist and indigenous authors. This format allows for an honest exploration of these limitations, while also aiming to act as a space that connects movements to these ideas. Finally, the zine includes a series of questions that speak directly to the reader in order to provide a reflective experience. My hope is that this becomes a first step towards deepening our understanding of how this paradox can nurture transformation within activist groups and through their actions across our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Do we have a question for Antonio? Oh, yes.
Thank you for that. So I'm looking at this amazing map here, this diagram. I love it. I am thinking about relationality, and I'm thinking about, I'm imagining what it would be like to be part of one of these communities, and I am imagining that history, context, familiarity plays a big role. How does that relate to your map?
So history, context, familiarity within activist groups, with other people within the group. Yeah, so what you often find is, particularly within groups, at least in my experience, I've been working from the inside, is that different people who have different relationships with each other will form closer bonds with each other. And so in a way, it plays act to what I'm saying, but on the other way, it actually starts to create fragmentations. Because what ends up happening is that people that have been in movements for longer tend to form informal power structures within those groups that then actually can push away other people within those groups. And so oftentimes this happens involuntarily. And so us versus them dynamics start to play a role. I have a bunch of books that I placed here, so I'm going to take advantage of the questions. I have a bunch of books that I placed here. And one of the ones that I think speaks to this the most accurately is Joyful Militancy by Bergman and Montgomery. And one of the things that they bring forward is this idea that the very dynamics that people challenge externally find their ways to play in internally. And so that often, they describe it as a rigid radicalism. And so it's often these kind of like ideological boundaries that are set. So I believe one thing, you believe another thing, and so we cannot be in this same group together, even though we are actually much more common. We have a lot more in common than apart. So I think it's an interesting one because in some ways relationship forms the foundation of these groups, but in other ways it can also hold them back unless they really have this. They really think about this stuff collectively as a whole constantly. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. And I see there's one quick question from Mo.
Thank you so much. It looked like a design manifest for me. My background's in design. And how do you see, especially the part that you said that design is shaping us and our lives, how do you see your perspective to design brings critiques to the dominant ways of doing design, you know?
Not so quick of a question, but I think part of the way that I'm starting it is by looking at, so a part of my INDI PhD research is around the design of group process, which is actually kind of really unconnected theoretically. Design art or design studies isn't necessarily connected to group process studies. That usually comes from human relations. And so part of that is thinking about, okay, can group process be an artifact of design? And if it is an artifact of design, then how can groups then, activist groups then use that as a way to sort of shape their ways of working together in ways that are more relational? So that's how the connection is made. Cool.
Okay, maybe we can keep the question for after the presentation so that we can move on to the next one. I see there are lots of questions and I'm happy to see them. Please keep them for after the presentation before we finish. Because now we go actually to our last presenter of today. Let's follow me. So you can come. Here's enough space. We have more space to fill. Thank you. And here we have Jay Marchand. She is also a PhD student in the INDI community. And her research title is very, very short. Where can we sing? Good luck.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for being here and for giving me the opportunity to present this. So I'm from experimental psychology, music, and gender studies. And I'm going to preface this by saying that I come to this work as an opera singer, a working opera singer. But I now work in auditory perception, and I study multimodality. In singing and in voice, we have this system called the Fach system, which comes from the unions of Germany and the French theater. And this is where we get those words, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, which you're probably familiar with. When all told, there are something like 30 subcategories of voice types, and many people disagree about who goes where. And the word Fach literally translates to compartment or box. So what we're doing is boxing people into their little voice category and then trying to train them that way. But when you add to this that we have issues of accessibility for disabled singers, weight and bathroom policing in the industry, gendered attire and choral singing, it actually excludes a lot of people, not just from professional life as opera singers, but also from just participating in the joy of singing in a choir. And this is especially dangerous for trans people because just speaking in the world can lead to dangerous situations in which even if visually your presentation is aligned with your gender, your voice might give you away. And we know that trans women, especially trans women of color, are subject to violence in the community. So I am looking at how do we fight biases that are both necessary because our brains must integrate sensory information to interpret the world, but have been habituated over centuries. My thesis is based on a series of experiments where people judge voices by sound alone, then by sight alone. So you're given a silent video and asked to decide what this person's voice might sound like based on their appearance, and then you judge an integrated version. And so listeners used a slider to evaluate the voices. And what we wanted to see was if a person sort of sounds like a soprano and looks like an alto, will your AV integrated evaluation of their voice slide over towards mezzo-soprano in the middle? And we found that it did. And we also, just sort of anecdotally, saw this to be stronger with people of color. So people of color are often judged to have low voices just based on how they look. So the work I'm presenting today is attempting to show in a creative way what the Fach system is. The colors here replicate the slider in my scientific experiment, going from high and light to dark and low. So soprano through bass. Then within each panel, you've got representations of the subcategories of voice types. So for example, baryton martin, which is the lightest baritone voice, lyric baritone, character baritone, Helden baritone, and then the two bass baritones at the bottom, which would be the heaviest, darkest, loudest voice types. So the images that you see here and in the video are a mix of my drawings about voice and identity and also photography. There's a sound element that goes along with that because I like to use oral history, autoethnography, and ethnography to tie the science back to the humans, because I don't like the idea that when we do science, we get all this data and then we just leave it there. I want to do science with a purpose. I want to use the science to help me help other people, both to break down the biases, but also because from a practical point of view, we're not going to do away with gender tomorrow. And trans people are out there suffering in the world, and I need to help my own communities. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay, for your presentation. Do we have a question for Jay? Well, okay.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the almost last point that you said, that we produce lots of data and outcomes from our research, but rarely people can make sense of the data. And what was the main point for you to disseminate the knowledge, your personal reason that you wanted to do this?
Thanks. I love a personal question. So I am a queer person and a person of color, and I was in the opera industry. I did a master's in opera performance. And I found that people had a really hard time interpreting me as a singer and as an artist, and I never quite found my footing. Are you a soprano? Are you a mezzo? Are you a soprano? Are you a mezzo? So I ended up with this label, Zwischenfach, which translates to between compartments, between boxes, because I go back and forth between soprano roles, mezzo roles, and alto roles. And I also play pants roles, which means I play men on stage. And this has caused such mayhem that I became interested in why we do this. And also, I am in the trans community, so I also am very aware of the things that are happening to trans people based on misinterpretation of gender and just prejudice, and I want to break it all down.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. Now, actually, we are coming to the end of the presentation of the participants of the INDI Research Day. So I think we saw a lot of amazing presentation and innovative ideas and from the interdisciplinary research background, which is amazing. So now it's our part from the audience to vote for what kind of presentation was the best. What do you think is the best? You should do it online. You need to log on online on the Zoom link, and you can vote there. There will be a poll which will be posted by Anna multiple times. Click on the link and then choose your favorite candidate. For the judges, I ask you now to secretly debate who will be the first and the second spot. In between, we are waiting for the results, or you're voting. We can answer much more questions. And I see there was a question somewhere here. So for you, for the ones who would like to vote, you can go ahead. For the other ones who would like to ask questions, we are here now and we go ahead. Thank you.
How does it? Yeah. Hey, cool. Sorry. Yeah. First off, thank you, because I want to say, like, I get a special kind of butterflies when I discover research that is active in a space that I didn't even think of before, and it's so true. Like, how does this apply to the opera world, which is incredibly gendered when you actually think about it, but it's so when you're not in it, sometimes it doesn't come to mind. So thank you. I guess the question I have is, are there when I think of opera, I think of like these kind of historical pieces that sometimes existed for centuries. Are there more contemporary revisitations of those pieces now that incorporate these principles, or is that still really far off from seeing the light of day? Okay.
That's an awesome question. We actually have a really strong indie opera community in Canada, and Rise Opera actually is right here at Concordia, and we are producing new operas using comprovisation, which is a term that Sandeep Bhagwati coined. He's also a professor here, but it's Eldad Sabari's project. Kofi is a member. If you listen later to some of the audio there, you'll hear kind of Rise style piece put together. But also I'm a member of a group called Opera Queens, and I have my Opera Queens water bottle with me. And we actually do mainstream opera, like Mozart to Puccini, names you know. But we do things like do them in drag or reverse roles. So I recently did Carmen, but I played Don José, and we had a tenor playing Carmen. And if you know the story, Don José ends up murdering Carmen in a fit of passion. So it was very interesting. We didn't comment on it, but there I was, and we had a tenor as Carmen in drag, a non-binary tenor as well. And I had to kill my Carmen. So it was very relevant to what is happening to trans women today in society. So yes, yes to all of it.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Antonio. Do we have any more questions? It could be like for Jay, it could be also like for someone else. Maybe online, in person. Yes.
Sure. For the architect one, because you were talking about AI, right? But also when we think about spaces, there's also VR and AR. So how about those building, right? Because you can do a lot of those, like not thinking about the human connection without even AI. So how are you applying it to like when people do like VR worlds, right? Like you have something like Minecraft, where the whole point is like you could build something practical, but then there's always that human need to be like extravagant, right? Because humans are not monoliths. So, you know, like how we're saying like AI doesn't understand, but how are we also reflecting that like humans are irrational, that a human might take the human factor and like, we need to have these buildings in this area because we have to go big, right? Like the concept of the white elephant. And yeah.
That's a good point.
So that's a great question. Thank you for your question. So yes, we are not saying the AI is not understanding, but what, and also the VR and AR is a good way for the, for the architect and designer to experience what they plan to build before it's actually built. So it has, what I would say, it has some potential. So like in my research or my PhD, I'm trying to see what is its potential and what is the consequence, what we actually sacrifice through this process. And then I'm trying to, somehow mitigate what we sacrifice and also use the potential of the computer and also the AI.
Thank you, Morteza. Okay, otherwise I have a question, and this is for Frederica. I really liked your presentation and the poster presentation and the concept, what you're doing. So my question is, leadership can be influenced also by gender, right? So sometimes you have different approaches, and this was also changing over the years, right? Do you see some kind of these trends in your study? The gender-based effects. Is it like vanishing more and more over time? Do you see still like differences between approaches like male participant or female?
Well, this happened to be a group of all women. I didn't mention this because I'm not quite there in terms of my analyses. Yes, but what I want to do, because it's a practice-based approach, I'm very interested in how they came to this type of organizing their work. You know, I categorized it as shared leadership constellations. So what I need to do, I want to go back in time, follow a few threads to see who came up with that particular organizational structure, and whether that was in fact influenced by the group of women who wanted in fact to create something so that there was a better distribution, if you like, of roles and leadership. So I haven't yet looked into that, but it's part of my plan, and to see if that's related to the fact that it's women who were designing this. Yeah.
Yes, I like this idea. I think there's a need for women in leadership, in particular, starting at the undergrad level. Thank you so much. So, do we have any more questions? No? I had one question for, like, the activist, for Antonio. Antonio, hi. I have a question for you. Because I really like the map you designed over there. Do you see like a change over the years, like in terms of activism? Because now I have the feeling it's more and more apparent in the news, or like people are getting more active. Do you think the way they are active, or the type, what kind of methods or approaches they're using is changing?
Yeah, I mean, why? It's hard to ask why, but I do think it is. I mean, digitalization of activism has made it a lot more apparent. So, you know, the use of social medias, the use of various digital tools in order to really engage. In the case in which some of the groups that I'm more kind of involved in, there's a distributed aspect of it. So activism isn't necessarily just this sort of very localized based on the people that are in a group, but it's able to be virtual in a way and able to be distributed across various mediums. And so I think there's a lot more as well, like almost professionalized tools for activists and community organizing as well. And so that's also spread it as well. So you are seeing in some ways, interestingly enough, kind of like, I don't want to say the professionalization of activism, but there is this level of sophistication that's growing as people are learning and information is spreading, and these digital tools are being made. And so I definitely think that's probably contributing to why it's becoming much more apparent. And it's also why I think we need to have a broader conversation on the tools that we're using and what does that mean for activists themselves.
Yes, indeed. That's very good. Thank you for your answer. Do you have a question?
Yeah,
Yes.
I have a question about opera.
Okay, let's go.
I was wondering if there is a disconnect between old classic opera and today's modern opera, and have you been able to attract the people like myself who like classic opera? Have you attracted us into what you're doing right now?
That is a really good question. I mean, I drag you there because you're my mom. And I appreciate that you come and sit through all the things I do, whether they're very, very mainstream or very, very experimental. But you're right. There are, I often joke that there are 7 people in the contemporary music scene, and we all go to each other's shows. I hope it's going to open up, and I hope that with groups like Opera Queens, who are retelling canon pieces in more inclusive ways, that we will start to attract people who like mainstream stuff. If we open the spaces and perform mainstream operas in places where disabled people can actually get into the theater and be in the audience, because that's another problem that we deal with in mainstream theaters, et cetera, that we will be able to kind of bridge the disconnect. But yes, absolutely, there is a big disconnect, and mainstream opera has way more money than indie opera, so that's a problem too.
So true. Thank you so much, Jay, for answering the question in your presentation. Since we don't have any more questions, we see that the participants and the audience is mingling around and answering questions and listening to each other and for networking purposes. So we wait, or you still can vote online. Use please the Zoom link, or like, not the Zoom link, the poll on Zoom, where you can choose your favorite presenter of today. And then we will take like a 5-minute or 2-minute break before we announce the winners of today. Thank you. Again, I would like to say thank you to all of the INDI students who were presenting today for their creativity and for the very, very interesting project. So it's a good job, awesome work, well done. And thank you for being part of the INDI Research community. So now we will start with the winners today. So our judges were coming to a conclusion. So thank you so much for being part and judging our presenters today. Thank you. And I will start with the second spot, so to say, of today. And the winner for the second spot is Gracia. Thank you so much. And congratulations, Gracia. So now moving on to the first place of today's INDI Research exhibition. And the first place got Jay. Congratulations. And finally, our audience also had the chance to vote. And so they did. And they came to the conclusion the People's Choice Award got Mo. Thank you, and congratulations. So thank you so much for being part today. And I was very pleased to attend all the presentations. So you can, of course, stay much longer. So the space is open until 3 o'clock. You can mingle around the participants, among the audience. You can grab a coffee or something to eat and ask, of course, more questions. Otherwise, I say thank you for attending the INDI Research Day today. And I will give the mic over to Felice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christiane. Yeah, just a few closing comments. Thank you everyone for being here. I want to recognize the many people who've been working behind the scenes today. We have Fourth Space, so we have Anna, Doug, and Jax who helped do the video, the organizing, keeping everything in line with technology, which I am an extreme phobe about, technophobe here. So thank you very much. To INDI, we have Darlene, who we have already recognized, but want to recognize her again for being here and organizing things. I want to thank our online and our in-person audience. Without you, we wouldn't be having this big INDI Research Day. Of course, to our presenters, and also special thanks to the supervisors who came out to support their students. It means a lot. Also online and in person. Special thanks to the School of Graduate Studies. Some of them were here earlier, also some have stuck around. Thank you also for being here. That means a lot. And yes, and special thanks to our Christiane, our MC. It's not an easy task, so thank you very much for supporting us and being here. All right, so that's a wrap for a formal portion of this day. And if you want to stick around, feel free and engage in more conversation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, folks on Zoom, just a quick note that we're closing up that space now. Thanks so much for joining us online. We appreciate your participation, your votes, and your questions. And a reminder that this is already up on our YouTube channel. So if you'd like to revisit today's presentations, check out Concordia University Fourth Space on YouTube, and you'll find the recording there. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.